Hello. Too many times I've seen Christians on social media say people are disrespectful to them. Too many times have I invited people to call where they have said, we've seen shows like yours where you don't let people speak and just abuse them. I say to those people, just like you wouldn't want to be lumped in with the Reverend Thornton Stringfellow, who wrote books promoting slavery, I ask you not to throw us on the garbage pile of angry atheist call-in shows. I'm not going to insult you. I'm not going to abuse you. I'm going to meet you exactly where you are, with exactly the same energy you bring to the call. So if you believe in God or the supernatural, if you want to discuss philosophy or ethics in a safe environment where we can really dig down to the core of the ideas, give us a call because the show is coming right now. Hello. hello. I don't know I'm sorry. It's because I've got Emma on. I think I'm posher than I am. Welcome, everybody. Today is June 29th, 2025. I'm your host, Richard Gilliver. And with me today is the absolutely fantastic Emma Thorne. Emma, how are you? Thank you for being here. It is an absolute pleasure to be working with you once again. I don't think we've worked together for a couple of years. I think it was a non-profits last time we did anything together. It's going to be fun.
That'd be right. It's going to be grand. I'm very happy to be here. Happy to be working with you again. Good old UK takeover.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a total one because even our backup host is from the UK today. So representing and if you are a theist, if you are a religious person and we invite lots of you to call the shows and not many of you take us up on it. I don't know whether it's you intimidated because Emma's an attractive girl who kind of looks like a boy a bit-ish, maybe. It's in your mind and it's kind of stirring feelings you don't want. Don't let that put you off. Give us a call. It's fine. It's fine. You're not going to be struck down for it. I can guarantee it. Give us a call. Let's do the important stuff. Talk Heathen is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a 501c3 non-profit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. Talk Heathen is a live call-in show, and we have open lines, so get your calls in at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. And before we get into calls, we have our usual question of the week section, Talk Heathen to Me. So we're going to bring in our wonderful backup host, Jamie, to deliver the goods. Hello, Jamie. How are you, mate?
Hello. Calling in. Remote reporting. It's rather hot here. It's perfectly fine. I have a cup of tea. Anyway, Talk Heathen to Me. We did ask you some questions. And we actually have a comedy hat trick coming up because all three of our answers, and they are very funny, all came from the same contributor. So our question was, last week we asked, name a bad time to give God control. And so, in at number 3, X Million. A bad time to give God control is when conceiving himself. Mommy issues. Number 2, again from X Million. A bad time to give God control is when creating a universe, evidently, as ours is nearly 100% deadly to life forms. Take it from someone who lives here. The fact that the sun will absolutely kill you if you let it while giving you life is so weird. Thanks, God. And number 1, X Million, one more time. Bad time to give God control is right before climax. Jesus, take the wheel.
Take the wheel.
Let him come into you. Oh dear. I hope we were past 2 minutes at that point, but thank you very much. But anyway. Did I just accidentally do demonetisation? I'm going to get slapped on the
Don't worry, I'm pretty sure I called everybody a cunt last week before 2 minutes, so it's fine.
Yeah, but they're here with me. They can come in here and beat me with sticks. Vern's just off camera holding a baseball bat. No, not really. But anyway, so the prompt for next week, and again, answers in the comments, not in the chat. The prompt for next week is Jesus' last words, wrong answers only. Do either of you have a funny impromptu answer to that prompt?
Emma, I'll let you go first.
Oh, sure, I have a stupid one. Pretty sure he looked Pontius Pilate dead in the eye and said, "You've crossed me for the last time."
I wish I'd have never asked.
Boo this woman.
And that was why he died.
Why do I do it to myself? I'm pretty sure that's the second time in the last half an hour I've let myself in for something like that. I think I would answer Jesus' last words. I wish I hadn't been so damn good at carpentry.
And then the making a cross for his own back. But yeah, mine would be nailed it.
Oh, God.
Have an excellent show, chap and chapette.
You know, next week I'm just going to work with Americans. That's it.
Fuck the British, they're all
How dare you?
Banned.
How dare you?
Jamie, fantastic. If you want to give your answers to that question, you can do so in the text box under the video. I don't know what that means. In the responses, the replies, the YouTube chat section. I don't know what it's called. The comment section. That's the one. The comment section is what I was going for all along. Answer in the comment section, and you will be picked out. Hopefully, we'll pick more than one person out next week. Make it a little bit more diverse.
Let's get some diversity in these answers.
Let's have some diversity in these answers. But of course, it's not just me and Emma and Jamie. Although if we could, with us being British, we could pull the whole thing off on our own all the time, just very easily. But we do have a crew across the pond helping us out a little bit, just a little bit. So if you want to bring the crew cam up and let's have a look at their wonderful faces. Let's have a look at that crew who makes all the magic happen. Look at them there. What a lovely bunch of people. All merrily facial hair. All of them, even the girls. Merrily facial head. We love the crew. We couldn't do this without them. And they let it get us away with a bit too much sometimes, but it's a lot of fun.
No.
But in the meantime, let's get on to what we're here for and what the crew facilitate, and that is the calls. And we have some. We have Samuel from Illinois, who wants to make a philosophical and scientific argument for God. Samuel, are you there?
Hello.
How are you?
I do. I'm sorry.
Good. You want to make a philosophical and scientific argument for God?
Yes, I do, actually. I'm much of my training in school for undergrad physics. I had a lot of interest in cosmology, and so I do also dabble in philosophy as well.
Okay, that's cool. Let's do it. This should be
Fire
interesting.
away.
Yes, I'd like to start with the philosophy. You've heard of Plato's school of the realm of forms, or
Yes.
Platonism.
Yes. Would you like to explain it to the audience, just in case they haven't, or would you like me to explain it to the audience? It might be better coming from your own words.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a professional on it, but I would say the gist is that essentially much of our concept of ideas and our concept, literally the concepts of things, inhabit a realm or dimension separate from the physical reality, and that us thinking about it is how we tap into things like mathematics, geometry, and language, that these things are independent from the physical world, and that Plato back then was trying to describe, I think what he called the realm of the pauroma, which is where we essentially draw from these ideas.
Yeah, so to kind of clarify that, for people who want the kind of gist of it, the main gist of it, Plato said there was a realm of perfect forms. So every time we, for example, think of a circle, it is an imperfect representation of a circle. The only true perfect circle exists in this realm of perfect forms. Have I got that about right to your understanding?
Absolutely.
Okay, so yeah, let's discuss it. Go ahead.
And so from that starting point, I think geometry is my base foundation. the fact that we can come up with geometry and that despite there no concept of a triangle existing, and yet most of our ideas around photography, basic engineering, architecture is built on ideas that don't actually physically exist, is what really started to open me up to the idea of God. Because to me, whether it be a concept like love or compassion, there might not be a physical explanation as to why those things exist, but at the same time, I would consider those to be emergent properties that we are drawing from in that essential Platonist point of view, that despite there not being a physical explanation for love, love exists in a different realm that we interact with. And I think that aspect is one of the characteristics of a God.
Why do you think that?
And,
why do you think that's the case? And we have, because you've let me just clarify why I'm asking that here. Because you've asked two, essentially for me, you've put two different points forward there. The first one is that things like love have no explanation. They're not physical things and they have no explanation, therefore God. And you also said geometry. And this falls into different categories for me, because the way I would explain it is, first of all, love does have an explanation. In fact, loves, the many different forms of love that we know of, have explanations. We know they come from the brain. We know they're emotional things. Friend of the show, Dr. Richard Firth Godby here, who wrote A Human History of Emotion, a very good friend of mine. I've known him for 20 years plus. He's written a book all about the history of emotion, where he talks about these different kinds of love. Neuroscientist Dr. Dean Burnett wrote a book called Emotional Ignorance, where he specifically talks about love and how it comes from the physiology, the brain, the nervous system, and the different kinds of love. So on that point, you've completely lost me, saying that it's not a physical thing. On the geometry part of it, where I think is you're going back to this realm of perfect forms from Plato, I think there are arguments against that. And I think, I think one of the stronger ones was put forward by Bertrand Russell, I think it was. And we can go into that shortly, but I'm really interested in why you think they are evidences or proofs for God in themselves, when one seems to have an explanation anyway. From the experts in the fields who talk about that certainly believe it has a physical explanation, and the other one is certainly philosophical considerations which we need to take into account. So why do you think that the realm of forms proves God? Things like geometry come from the realm of forms, and the arguments, specifically the arguments against those, aren't strong.
Yeah, and I should apologize for the love, because I'm a huge advocate for natural selection. So I could say that there are multiple physical explanations as to why organisms would have compassion or want to experience, social relationship with each other. I only offered that big one because at times I would say in a zero-sum universe, there might be pressures as to why we would pursue love as a broad concept as opposed to just self-interest. Even then, Richard Dawkins does talk about why you could be compassionate. I would say the geometry angle is compelling to me because I would say it's an example of an emergent property that has no physical reality, and yet the truth of it is so powerful that it does, in fact, influence the physical reality, if that makes sense. Like I said, there is no true triangle.
Argue with you a tiny bit, Samuel. Sorry, just because I think the way that I'm not an expert in mathematics, so forgive me. I read a lot and then I forget half of what I read, so I reread a lot. But I reread a lot on mathematics and the mathematics of the universe, and I've watched a lot of interesting documentaries on people who think that maths is related to mathliness is next to godliness, or however you might describe it. But my understanding of mathematics is descriptive of the universe. It's not as some separate some separate property that doesn't have a physical manifestation, but rather it's a language that describes the physical world around us. So I feel like we're disconnected on that.
Well, and that's a school of philosophy. Is it a discovery or is it something that we invent? And my point of view is that I think it's a false distinction, that ultimately it's both something that we discover and something that is innate, because or something that we contribute. Because I think, and that ties into the land of forms, is that I think people are essentially a window into that, essentially, which is why art is like so powerful to us. When people make a beautiful artwork, I think they're tapping into something greater than themselves, but they also
why do you
are the
think that?
window to that.
Why is it, Samuel,
Because
that you think that? It's a nice thing to think. I just don't understand why.
Well, I think that because essentially when they're doing something like a sense of awe or appealing to something more, and I don't want to use the word divine, but something greater than themselves, I think that is, I think it is emotionally appealing, but I think it's also like a sign of something deeper innate to like consciousness itself. Because essentially, I don't know why people are oriented towards more radical concepts like both beauty and disorder, but I think that would help explain why. Because I think in their forms, in separate from the physical laws and everything, things like order and chaos are just, absolute, and that we can choose between the two. But to have like in a physical, like there could be a physical explanation as to why we like music, and in the future that could be given. But as of right now,
we know lots of reasons why we like music, to do with the brain and the natural rhythm of the human body and things like that. There are lots of reasons. I feel like if this isn't, because I think you've got a really interesting approach and you're very nice about it. I think, Samuel, this might be a bit of a god of the gaps, just put in an interesting philosophical way.
Oh, no, and absolutely. But my appeal would be that it's not necessarily God of the gaps. I think that God and science are one of the same, that the physical constants and such, though, are manifestations of something intertwining with us, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah, I mean, this is something that Yeah, sure. I'll just say that this is something that a conversation that I have with a lot of people. And something that I preface whenever I talk about religion, well, most of the time when I talk about religion, because it comes up a lot. The concept of, like, whether via mathematics or cosmology or something, of like the something greater being explained as God, is really just a personal descriptor. It's just a distinction that I personally prefer, and I'm fine with you to feel that way. I'm fine with you to call that unknown God. For me, it's just a scientific unknown. What's the purpose of this idea? What does this do for us?
Well, and here's the thing, and here's the contradiction. Well, I wouldn't say it's a contradiction, but I would say that God wants us to be in a situation where we don't necessarily have to depend on him, but that we do appeal to higher truths as a way for us to self-orient ourselves, whether it be like through compassion for others, through empathy. Because when other religions say that you have to believe, it's almost used as a threat rather as a tool for us to be together. But
is it? I mean, I don't mean to interrupt you, Samuel, but my degree is in religious studies. I've studied lots of religions. I've been very fortunate, I consider myself, to have been a guest at Buddhist temples and mosques and lots of different churches. And I've never heard anybody really kind of outright threaten people that you've kind of got to follow them in a threatening manner. There's the kind of background, like underhanded, well, you might burn in hell forever if you don't kind of threat. But surely that's in Christianity as well. I've heard, I'm sure Emma has heard as well, many Christians make that remark. Well, you'll burn for hell, you'll burn in ever for hell. That kind of threatening, and that's from Christians. I don't really hear anything I hear that in some other religions, but I don't hear anything beyond that in other religions. I've certainly never been at a mosque, and I've never gone in pretending to be a Muslim, and I've never been in a mosque and somebody walk up to me with a gun and say, "You will convert or else." It's never happened. It's never happened. So I think you may be watching too much TV.
Historically, don't you think that's a bit disingenuous, though, that there has been instances of Muslim clerics and preachers of the past using...
Yeah, I think probably every religion has done it in the past, but from my personal experience interacting with these people, it's not something that happens every day. Do you not think it's happened in Christianity in the past, where people have been threatened that if you don't turn into Christian...
I'm not saying it's innate to any religion. I'm saying oftentimes the reason why religion is so compelling is both the institution and the implicit threat of denying anyone religion. Like, if you deny Christianity, you will go to hell. If you deny the Prophet Muhammad, you will be put to the stake. I'm saying that oftentimes religion does use implicit threats as a way to galvanize, loyalty to that religion.
That's a fair enough statement, Samuel. I'd just like to point out that's a fair enough take, but you did say that Christianity doesn't do this and other religions do. And that was the point I was making, that, not all other religions do it. Like, it's just not a given in other religions that it happens. And when we look back historically, Christians also do it as well. So it's not particularly a good argument when you're trying to say, well, Christianity doesn't do this, other people do, because it's a bit nonsensical, really, isn't it?
But I'm not claiming Christianity is better for that reason at all.
Okay. That's certainly how it sounded. Anyway, let's move on.
Sorry. I think Samuel and Richard, you guys are just getting a bit crossed wires on that. I really would like to hear the scientific aspect of your offerings, please, Samuel.
Yes. So essentially has to do with cosmology and the nature of time, because a lot of my... Well, I shouldn't say a lot. Some of my studies in school was related to cosmology and Big Bang Theory. And essentially, you've heard of the concept that, time is an emergent property.
Sure.
Yes.
Well, it's a part, relativity, but essentially that mass and energy, when combined, are what allow for time to exist, because it's an aspect of space-time itself. It's kind of relating from Richard Penrose's idea of, I think it's his idea of a cyclical universe, and it's it has its relationship with shapes, in that, and maybe I'm butchering this a lot, is that over a given enough time, especially as matter and energy dissipate over trillions upon trillions of years, that they will essentially be a time where, because there's no reference point for how time should function, essentially there is no endpoint to time, and so infinity becomes, literally physically manifest, and that in relation to things like quantum fluctuations, you can get something like a Big Bang again. That's very reductive for what could be a much more in-depth explanation. But how I relate to that is that I believe that, have you heard of the concept of a Boltzmann brain?
Yes.
I haven't.
Would you like to explain it for the audience and for people who haven't?
Me.
Yes, very top. Yes, a top-down explanation is that essentially quantum fluctuations, or just things like quantum fluctuations could recreate what could be considered a human brain, whether it be physical or just the electrical wiring of a physical brain, and that. However unlikely it is, because time is infinite, supposedly, which it has yet to be proven. Given enough time, you could essentially recreate the perfect replication of a human brain, even without a body, essentially.
Forgive me, Samuel, but weren't you talking about the scientific proof for God here? And as much as, Boltzmann's brains, and we can get onto the philosophy in a second, but Emma asked you specifically about the science, and when you jump into the speculative, then we're not really talking about the science anymore.
Or evidence.
Oh, yeah, or indeed evidence. You started talking about infinity and cyclical universes, and that confused me a little bit because the prevailing theory in cosmology is the heat death of the universe. That, you know, things are going to stretch out so much that the heat will essentially, it's why it's called the heat death. The universe started being infinitely hot from the that word that I can't remember, that little dot point thing, singularity is the one. I'm doing that a lot today, I don't know why. The singularity from which universe came was infinitely hot and dense. It's cooled down, and it will cool down to such a rate that all the heat will be dissipated, the universe will stretch out that far, and that's why it's called the heat death. That's the prevailing theory in cosmology. So it's interesting to me that you're talking about scientific evidence. You're trying to present this as scientific evidence, but you're talking about a hypothesis which isn't the kind of mainstream accepted one by the majority of physicists. So what is it about the cyclical universe? Sorry, carry on, please.
Oh, yeah. I would say this is an argument the same way, prosecution would make an argument. I can't tell you with any certainty what I'm saying is the truth. I was raised in a Christian household, but I was very, very skeptical of any type of claim for God. It's only until recently that I would say that I'm warmed up for more both a philosophical and scientific explanation for God, but I can't say with any certainty that God is real. I'm just saying that this is a compelling argument for me as to why I think it could be plausible that he exists. But,
that's okay, Samuel. I just want to interrupt you again, just to clarify. Can we agree then? Because I just want us to be on the same page. Can we agree that regarding the point you made about love, that isn't evidence for God, because you've agreed with us? It does come from the physical, and this idea that the cyclical universe and Boltzmann's brains, these aren't actually, because Emma specifically asked you for the scientific evidence, these aren't in fact scientific evidence. These are things that you are convinced of, but the scientific evidence doesn't actually state that these things are true. It doesn't evidence them. Can we agree on those things? And then let's move on into the things that we can that talk about that may be compelling to us.
Oh, no, there are definitely hypotheses, but I would say, for one, if we can get into it, I mean, the reason why I find those so compelling is the fact that it's not just the God, the gas, is that many of the interpretations relying on those things fit into, like, actual cosmology. The fact that, because for the Big Bang, there is no starting. Each point of the universe has experienced the Big Bang. It's just the fact that there is no, how should I put it? There's no time before the Big Bang. Essentially, that all times, all clocks start there. And for me, I feel like that is proof that in the idea of simultaneity, if you know that, is both it's proven, and that's inherent to relativity. And for me, that's proof that time as a concept isn't as strict as what many lay people might assume to be about the universe.
I'm just not sure, Samuel, if I understand how your thoughts on the nature of time and cosmology relate to God. I mean, if we were going to have a properly link these ideas that you're talking about with God, we'd have to ask you to define what you're talking about when you say God anyway. Are you talking about a creator being, something that originated the universe? Are you talking about something that is somehow responsible for interacting with the nature of space-time? Or so I just wonder if there's a way you can succinctly sort of explain for us, so that we can have this conversation, what is the link between these cosmological and philosophical discussions and you thinking that is related to God, or some kind of argument for God? Because I'm a bit lost, to be honest.
Okay, then let me give a broad, and obviously, like I said, much of it is hypothesis, so you can feel free to say that the science isn't certain, and I would agree. So my view is that because time is infinite, quantum fluctuations will eventually produce something like a Boltzmann brain, and in my opinion, I would call that something like a god, if not God, and that I think
the brain you would call God, or the you would call that brain-like creation God, or you would call the events that facilitated that God? What is it you're calling God?
Well, I think God is the totality of the system, but I would think the brain is in that situation would be the entire system, because in that environment, especially once the heat death approaches, the heat death I think can never be completed because there's no way for all energy to ever dissipate. Space-time itself has inherent energy, which is why quantum fluctuations, which is scientific, has been proven without a shadow of a doubt that over time, if it's possible for something to arise like a Boltzmann brain, it will inevitably arise. And because of that, I think our universe is something of a product of a previous Boltzmann brain, which I would call God.
That's first of all, it's a bit of a tautology to say that it's possible for something to arise, therefore it will arise. That's given. The thing I think I'm having trouble with is connecting the dots. In fact, a couple of things on this point. First of all, connecting the dots that it is possible to begin with. I don't think you've demonstrated that. And secondly, you jump in from this idea of a Boltzmann brain, which in the original formulation was the idea that a brain was created including memories, and this is how minds can form. It doesn't necessarily, even if a Boltzmann brain formed, it doesn't necessarily lend itself that it is a god, never mind a specific god. So it seems like there's a lot of dots you need to connect, which you're not currently connecting. I'm certainly having trouble with that. I think Emma's having a bit of trouble with that as well. All we're asking you to do is connect the dots for us. Walk us through the process of this is, I think a Boltzmann brain might be possible. I think it's possible because step A, B, and C. And I think that a Boltzmann brain is God. Walk us through the steps A, B, and C. And that God is a specific God. Walk us through the steps A, B, and C. Because all you're doing at the moment is saying, well, I think a Boltzmann brain can be created, and then I think that's God, and that created the universe. And you're not really showing us any of the working out. You're just telling us what you believe, and that's fine. That's what we're here for, to listen. But we want to know why you believe it. We want to work through that with you, rather than just having you tell us, because that's a bit boring. If I'm honest, from my point of view, I want to know why people are talking about it.
Yes, I mean, so I would say from the beginning, then. For quantum fluctuations is that essentially, I don't want to give too much of a lay view, but the fact that literally at the fundamental reality, things pop in and out of existence. Would you agree that happens?
Yeah, I think that happens. Yeah, I think that's what the physics shows. I don't know about him. I don't know how much I've
I think the most accurate way that I've read my favorite physicist describe it is that that's what appears to be the case. From what we can see, I don't think it's totally accurate to say that is what happens. That's certainly an approximation from our view, but yes, but I'm happy to go with that.
Yeah, fair point, fair clarification.
Yes, and through that, would you say that random fluctuation, if in an environment like the one described by the Big Bang, that a random fluctuation could have caused the Big Bang?
Now, this is where I'm getting confused, because you're saying in an environment like the Big Bang and could have caused the Big Bang. So you seem to be kind of like jumping backwards and forward time-wise here. What we know about the Big Bang, this precedes the Big Bang. The Big Bang is the process where we have this change of state. This is the name we give to it. I know you know this, Samuel. I'm explaining this to the audience. So the Big Bang is this change of state we have from where we have this infinitely hot and dense point, which is a singularity, Richard. Which a name I couldn't remember earlier. And this hot and dense point, for some reason, we don't know why, began to start cooling and expanding. In that cooling process, it began to expand, and that's how all the particles and everything formed. And it is this expansion process, this point where it cools and expands. We kind of put a demarcation line there, and we say this is called the Big Bang. This is time zero. This is where everything began. But before that, we don't actually know how the singularity came to be. And there are, as you say correctly, lots of theories about it. Some people connect these theories of things jumping up, appearing out of, and I'm going to be very careful here when I say this, nothing is not actually a nothing. It's a physical, it's a state of where particles jump out of like a kind of weird particle gravy, which doesn't exist but does exist at the same time. Physics is great, isn't it? And we have this, and these particles jump out of this. That's one of the ideas about how the singularity started was that it was one of these particles that popped out of this weird gravy stew and suddenly formed our universe. And there might be, there are lots of hypotheses that say there might be many of these that happen all the time, that they might even happen within our own universe all the time and form new universes. And it's all lots of fun, but it is a hypothesis. We don't know that's how the universe started. Certain physicists, I think Lauren Krauss ascribes to this idea that, that's how the universe came about. And I think it's interesting, and these hypotheses are interesting, but it's even more interesting to me when you're ascribing, look, I believe in a God, and I believe in a God because of this, when it is a hypothesis and we don't actually know the answer. And this is why it's so important for me to ask you, how are you doing the work? Because you're describing one of many hypotheses, but yet again, if you forgive me, Samuel, you're not actually showing us you're working out. You're not saying, this is my preferred hypothesis because, and here is my reasoning. You're saying to us, this is my preferred hypothesis. And if you follow it down this line of lots of preferred hypotheses I have, then it is you get to God. But you're not showing us, she's still not showing us the working, and that's the really, really important part for us. And that's what we're just missing out from you, Samuel. So if I can really try and get you to zone in on giving us the working out, rather than just saying that, this hypothesis makes sense to me, this hypothesis is attractive to me. Can you kind of tell us why you think that hypothesis is the case, why it is your preferred hypothesis over the many others that are out there?
Yes, because I think over the span of what I think is infinity, because I do think infinity as a concept exists. I think mathematics deals with infinity all the time, and whether or not you think mathematics is real or to describe something, I do think things like calculus and even geometry, both. I'm humbled to say whether or not it proves, but it does. The fact that it often needs infinities in equations tells me that the concept of infinity does exist. And with that in mind, if that applies to something like time, whether or not I can say with certainty that it will eventually create something that I would call a God, that over time something like the Boltzmann braid would arouse, and because of that
arouse
thing would become. I'm sorry, arise.
Sorry. No, sorry. It was too easy a target to let go unchallenged. Please continue, Samuel. Sorry, just ignore me.
I think he wants to experience love, so yeah, I think arouse is valid. But
Comes full circle.
Boltzmann, and it intersects with the philosophy that I think once that entity is created, the Boltzmann brain, it wants to simulate it's the self-existence essentially, and be able to feel what it's like to be a conscious agent. And in an environment like that, I think something like an ancestor simulation would help explain why something like the universe would come about. Essentially, it would create its own universe to be able to experience itself.
I'm going to pass you to Emma shortly to respond to you, Samuel. I'm just going to say before I do that, thank you for acknowledging that infinity is a thing. It's very nice to hear a theist say that, because so many pretend that it's not. And if you would like to debate William Lane Craig and correct his silly, foolish ass on this notion, please feel free to arrange one, and I will be watching it and in your corner all the way. But with that, I'm going to pass you over to Emma so she can respond to what you've said so far, and then we'll let you continue.
I'm happy with everything that you've said so far, Samuel. I'm still as like Richard, I'm still hung up on the why. You've said you think that this is a good. I just need to know why you think that a Boltzmann brain, is it? I'm not familiar with the concept, so if I'm misunderstanding it completely, you have to talk to me like I'm 5. I'm sorry. Why you think that relates to a creator in the sense that it would want to create, how what this theoretical simulated brain would want, and how that relates to there being a god. Because I feel like I could be on board with all these hypotheses, and maybe I would read a lot and these would be my favorite, and I still wouldn't have any faith in a god. So I'm just still getting a bit lost on kind of the basics, I think. That might be me just not understanding fully.
No. And also for your William Craig debate, if this is anything to go by, I would have to practice a lot not to be.
I don't think you would. But, I think you'd be all right, mate, to be honest, because he's a bit shit. He's not as good as everybody makes out.
But I would say I'm very much butchering, I think, the philosophy of a short story. Have you heard of The Egg?
I mean, that's a little bit vague. I've heard of eggs.
An egg.
Well, for the listeners hearing this, I would very much recommend reading it. I think it's a very beautiful short story about why God would make reality. And it's essentially the idea that he wants to replicate himself, create another entity similar to him, which is why I think something like the Garden of Eden is allegorical. I don't know if I'm breaking with, major Christian doctrine, but I think the idea that it was a mistake for us to eat the tree is, apologies for my language, utter bullcrap. I think he wants us to experience the very nature of being alive, which includes both love and pain. And the idea that things like us learning to become more compassionate with one another, despite our animalistic tendencies, is the entire point. Our ability to overcome hardship is why we have to be in a universe filled with death and pain. I don't know why people make so much fuss about sin. I think sin, it's what we needed to hear at the time of the message, because a lot of people, I think, are really much oriented towards an authoritative figure telling them what they have to do rather than given them a good explanation as to why they should do it innately. But to me, the reason why the Boltzmann brain is appealing is that the fact that within the short story, essentially, it's about him wanting to come closer to his creation by making us go through a very active existence, which includes all of the human emotions, all of our struggles, all of our pain, so that we can come closer to him eventually.
Doesn't this kind of
that's the main purpose?
I feel like, Samuel, I know you said that you've you sort of did a lot of reading and philosophizing that brought you to more of a theistic perspective. But I do wonder if you have to start here with a presupposition that God exists and that you have an idea of what he wants. And because for me as a person who has no relationship with the God concept, there's nothing to link this nice story or what sounds like if I was going to be a Christian, I'd probably be on board with your philosophy. I like the sound of it, but because I like the sound of it doesn't mean that I think it's true. So I'm just losing where it's just because we sort of were drawn in because there was an idea of like evidence, and just an idea of like, this is why I'm compelled to believe in God. But it feels like you have to believe in God at the start for your ideas to make sense. Did that make any sense?
No, absolutely. And for full clarity, I would say I did have, a supernatural visitation, but my thing is I don't believe anyone should believe my anecdote. I think anecdotes are terrible evidence. So if I would say that I had something like that, I don't expect either of you to believe that. I would say this is somewhat of a post hoc rationalization as to why that experience was as powerful as it was. Mm-hmm. But to me, I think a big view on my idea of God is that fact that it's not coercive, essentially that you don't have to necessarily believe God is there. Because my thing is, I think it's like an experiment almost. The laboratory doesn't want to tamper with the results too much. Otherwise, what's the point of running the experiment for me? Like, I don't want to taint my results. Otherwise, the entire point is fruitless. So I think for me, my idea of God is something that is passive in the way he interacts with the world. I think he wants us to. I'm sorry.
Sorry, you can finish. You can finish your point, Samuel. You go ahead.
Yes, like the passivity of him essentially giving out edicts is something that human religions falter with, because I think all human religions are somewhat true. It's just the fact that because people value tribal instincts over a lot of things, they hyper-focus on certain bits of truth and then they put human, faults within them. Like, for example, I think a lot of the 10 Commandments are true, but some of them I don't think are true. I think some of them are just what humans at the time put in order to make sure that they can maintain power. I think that
I am gonna cut in because I feel like we're gonna go off on big old tangents, and I think we've kind of got to the crux of it, which I did a video a little while ago. I don't know if anybody watching saw it, but it was 10 reasons I'm not a Christian in response to the question, why aren't you a Christian? And one of my given reasons is that most of the time when I talk to somebody who has evidence and compelling reasoning, it turns out after a long-winded discussion, no offense, Samuel, I do think it's been very interesting and you've been very nice with interesting ideas, but it tends to boil down to I had a religious experience, or I was brought up Christian, or, something that is anecdotal. And like you said accurately, we can all agree, isn't evidence. It's not going to change my mind or Richard's mind. And I don't think there's anywhere really else we can move with this. You've got some interesting ideas. To you, they say God is real. To me, they have nothing to do with God. And the conversation, I think, just is going to be cyclical after this point, because I don't think we can relate to each other.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I wasted your time. I just wanted to give
You've not wasted our time at all.
Not at all.
No, you've not wasted our time at all. And Samuel, you've been greatly respectful, and I've thoroughly enjoyed having the conversation with you. I do want you to call back, and believe it or not, I actually want to discuss the religious experience. There's this kind of experience you had, because I want you to walk through the actual experience and what is compelling about it for you, and see if we can work together to try and untangle that web and see why it's not compelling for us, why it's compelling for you. See if we can reach some kind of ground where we can agree on it. In the meantime, I'm going to do a secular rarity and give you some homework. I don't usually do this for people, but I have thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with you. And we didn't quite get to everything I would have liked to have got to in the time we've had. I want you to kind of, if you haven't already, I want you to go away and read up on Bertrand Russell's kind of objections to the perfect Platonic realm, because it has some really, really good objections to it. And if you haven't read them already, please go and read them. Him and other philosophers. There are some quite major flaws with it, so it'd be good for you. I keep glancing up because I keep forgetting his name, and I've got his History of Western Philosophy sat on my bookshelf just up to my left, so I keep up just to remind me of what he's called. But if you read up on some of Bertrand Russell and other people's objections to the perfect Platonic realm, because some of them are quite compelling, if you can give us a call next time, please do. I'm going to let you go, but if you can give us a call next time, let's please discuss your experience and walk through it.
Yes, I will do. Thank you so much.
Not a problem, and thank you so much for calling. That was I really enjoyed
thank you,
that
Samuel.
call.
That was a really good one. That was a great first call.
Yeah, it really, really was. I'm going to get. I have seen. And I hope this is who I think it is. There's someone in the screening room. They're not quite ready to be taken yet. And it says, I was asked by Richard to call and discuss my faith in God. I think this might be someone I've been having an interaction with on TikTok. And it's been really, really interesting. And I am so pleased if it is this guy who has called. But we do have a couple of announcements before we get to that next call. It is that time of year again. So it's always that time of year, isn't it? We are so excited. I said that in the most unexcited voice. Let me try that again.
We're so excited.
We are so excited to announce the back cruise tickets are up for sale. Forrest, J. Mike, Dr. Ben, Objectively Dan, and other hosts. I guess that means that they've not been confirmed yet. That's why the names aren't there. You love will be there. I'm not going to be there, so your favourite host won't be there. Join us in August 16th, 2025, and get your tickets and all info at tiny.cc/backcruise. Tickets sell out fast, so get your tickets now. And as confirmed on last week's show, Sidney Davis Jr. will be making an appearance as an actual bat, because everybody knows Sidney is a vampire. A great way to support us, other than going to the back cruise, is by sending super chats and get them in, and we will read as many as we can. And I'm going to read the one we've had. You tight-arsed people, come on, get your money in get your hand in your pockets. I'm going to read the one super chat we've had after I've finished these announcements. Join our weekly watch parties at the Free Thought Library on Sundays for live viewings of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience every Sunday. Doors open at noon, and it is a great place for building community. And that is exactly where Jamie the Blind Limey is backing up from live today. So if you are at the watch party at the Atheist Community of Austin, at the Free Thought Library, please go up to the window and go like that to Jamie from me. Just put him off as much as possible. And finally, you can follow Talk Heathen on TikTok. We do a pre-show live every Sunday where we go, when we say we, it's me, goes live and talks to people and eventually just tries to coax you to call in. Let's not dress it up. That's what it is. And I always have a great deal of fun on there. And those who join me in there, we've got some regulars. We always little 20-minute segment. We have a lot of fun over there. So get yourself over there as well. And we do have a super chat, as I mentioned, Morgan_Fleeman, who sent CHF2. I don't know what CHF currency is. Do you know what that is, Americus? I have no idea.
Chuffs, two chuffs.
Two chuffs. And says, I thought it's called love, not love. And then there's some kind of silly face doing that. Much love. Thank you very much for that super chat. You too can send super chats, and we will read them out if they are not disgusting or naughty or dirty. Well, they can be dirty and naughty. We'll read them out as long as they're YouTube friendly. We'll read them out. Let's be right about it. So if you want to comment on anything myself or Emma has said, but you're not brave enough to call in, send us a super chat and do it. And with that, I'm very excited about this. Joe, from the UK. Hello. From the UK, who wants to talk, have a discussion on faith in God. Now, I talk to a lot of people, and are you the person I've like had the major interactions with, all the DMs and stuff, or are you someone else?
Yeah, that would be me.
Brilliant. That is brilliant. Thank you very, very much for calling in. I do appreciate it. I know we've had a bit of a back and forth. So we've got the wonderful Emma Thorne here, who's going to be joining me on taking your call. So take it away. This is a platform where we invite you to tell us what you believe, and we walk through that. So, take it as way. Tell us what convinced you that God exists.
Yeah. All right. I'm not going to ramble on too much because I have had a pretty wacky experience with God in my life. Sorry, I do apologise. I've never actually done, obviously, this talk show before, but
it's fine. It's fine. I know we might have got a little bit heated at points on TikTok. We are really friendly. We are, we're friendly and we're welcoming. There's nothing to be nervous about. Please, just take it in your own time, and we'll respond when we feel it's appropriate.
And likewise, I apologise for my frustration on the TikTok. So I'm, just figuring it all out as I go along. But so yeah, never believed in God at all. I weren't even interested. Never went to church until I was about 19. I started heavily abusing drugs, and obviously that period of my life is a little bit of a blur because of the damage that I'd done to my brain. But I had the topic of God came into conversation with me and a couple of my friends for a couple of weeks leading up until this night. And this is not, I hope I can say this I'm not going to specify which drug because I don't know if you can say that on the show, but I had a bad drug addiction and it was causing me problems with my health, abusing it every single day. And I had a very, very sort of weird spiritual experience where I thought I overdosed and I took a separate drug, which is sort of considered a psychedelic, strong amount. And I sort of lay down and died, basically. I died, and what I thought God was, what I experienced God to be, which I don't think that it's a man in the clouds or whatever. It was the energy of love came and surrounded me. My late nan, who I felt she was there, and I thought, this is so peaceful. And then I thought, holy crap, I'm dying, and God is here right now. And then since then, I broke out of that trip, and I went to rehab, got clean, and I connect with this thing as much as possible, whatever I know God to be, and I'm still figuring it out. I'm only young. I'm still sort of figuring it out as I go along. And this thing, whatever, I know this is a show that is atheist run, if I'm not wrong. Sorry if I'm wrong. But this thing, in my experience, I connect with it, and it does wonders in my life. It really does wonder. It puts things into play for me, which I never could have believed has happened. And my life has transformed tenfold, and I never could have done it on my own. Sorry for a bit of a ramble. I just wanted to.
No, it's fine. We just wanted to let you get your story out. Emma, have you got anything in response to what Joe said?
First of all, congratulations on getting clean, Joe. It's a very, very difficult thing to do and remarkable. And I think as much as I'm very happy for you to have this beautiful faith in this God that you've experienced, you need to make sure you give yourself a healthy dose of patting yourself on the back because you've done the hard work. It's a fairly common story in the conversion world of it's a fairly common story in the psychedelic drug world as well. I've experienced something, a spiritual kind of awakening. In my opinion, from my perspective, it's the human brain, the wonders of the human brain. Essentially, I think this is a beautiful story of you digging yourself out of your own problems. And I love that you describe the experience as wacky because I love a wacky story, and I would say that this is a great example of the wacky experiences that can occur when your brain chemistry goes crazy with psychedelics. For me, I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it, where your personal experiences with God and spirituality are never going to translate to another human being because we've not been inside your brain. For me, you had a chemical experience. For you, you had a religious experience. The important thing is that it made your life better. And I don't really have any other thought.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Joe, I think one thing that you've said really stood out to me more than anything else, and that was when you said you died. Now, I think there's some confusion around near-death experiences, which is what I'm assuming you meant. Either you had an NDE, because a lot of people think that they died and came back from death. But in actual fact, we have no confirmed medical cases of anybody ever in history being legally dead and coming back.
No.
What happens is we have people coming back from brain death, and that's not being legally dead. That is essentially not being dead, because dying, it isn't just a light switch where you turn it on and off. It's a process where your body and the whole system begins to shut down. And in every case that has been, recorded and studied properly, what we found is that when people have been resuscitated, they haven't been resuscitated from legal death. They've been resuscitated from brain death. And what's been happening is this process of dying has been taking place. So there is still, as has been recorded, kind of glimpses of consciousnesses there. There is still people still experience things during this process. And then when they're resuscitated, they think they've been brought back from death. But it's actually not death, as we would kind of call death. It's actually the process of dying which has been stopped and reversed. So I think I'm not diminishing your experience. I fully believe that you've had the experience, but I think it's very, very important that we understand the difference. When someone says, like in your case, I was brought back from the dead, we're not talking about legal death. Because that's never happened as far as we know.
I'm still here.
Yeah.
Because I'm still here, obviously, so I can't have died. But I'm wondering, have you ever, has anyone ever come onto the show and talked about the experience of, because obviously the chemical or very similar chemical to dimethyltryptamine is released in the brain when you die. Yeah. Has anyone ever come onto the show and talked about the experiences of, like, because I've never done it, but people having that experience with, the toad's venom and having that dimethyltryptamine experience where they feel like they do have that brain death and say the same sort of thing? Is that sort of similar?
It's funny you should say that. Because I have a paper in front of me, which is called Classic Hallucinogens and Mystical Experiences, Phenomenology and Neurocorrelates from 2018 by the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences and Neurosciences at Johns Hopkins University. And the person who sent me this study, I'm going to call them out, is called Jimmy, and he claims to hail from Texas when he has called every single call-in show going. Every single host on every single call-in show going, apart from moi. He refuses to call and talk to me. And the reason I believe he refuses and calls to talk to me is because he offered me this paper as evidence that there is a God that people can experience when they take huge quantities of DMT. And I ripped this paper apart, and he has refused to call in and talk to me for 5 years. I have been trying to get him to call in and talk to me. The lady who does our after shows, who facilitates our after shows over on Discord, she has been present when I have been inviting him in to call, and he has point blank refused to call in. He just won't talk to me. He won't do it. This is very interesting.
The reason I feel like I called in is because I feel like, after we've gone back and forth on the old TikTok and stuff, I feel like my views can get, and yours as well, could get, some misconceptions over text messages. So I thought like I'd do it out of respect to just phone you and clear up the confusion. Because at the end of the day, it's one of them things, it's life, innit? Like sometimes you believe something and someone else will believe another thing. And your paths will just never cross in that sense, that you'll never, and I respect the fact that you call me out on my TikToks, and I know I've apologized again. I've got a bit frustrated in the past.
It happens. Don't worry about it. It happens.
I got to say though, I swear on everything, right? I did not filter your comments on my page.
If anyone goes onto my TikTok page, they will see a little picture of me doing something like that, and the private message that Joe sent me saying, "I promise, mate, I didn't delete your things. I didn't delete your comments. Don't worry about it. It's water under the bridge, and I appreciate you calling."
It's like class as offensive for some reason. I don't know. I think. No, I'll tell you what it was. It's because I got so frustrated at you that I blocked you, but then I thought it was so interesting that I unblocked you. So you must have got in my head that much that I unblocked you, and it's probably because of that.
Listen, mate, don't worry about it. I genuinely appreciate you calling. I do want to get back to this mystical experience state, because I have done a lot of studying this. My degree is in philosophy. It's partly in philosophy. It's in other stuff as well, religious studies and ethics, because it's a weird degree which just encompasses lots of things. But one of the kind of the things I'm most interested in philosophy, a personal passion of mine, is consciousness studies. So I've done a lot of stuff. I've been meditating for 20 plus years. So a lot of this stuff in this paper that was sent to me about these mystical experiences, I've actually experienced. There's something which are called the kind of 6 dimensions of mysterious experience, mystical experience, which were put forward by a guy called Walter Stace. And they are sacredness, a noetic quality, deeply felt positive mood and joy, ineffability, paradoxicality, and the transcendence of time and space. And I'm sure that sounds very, very familiar to you, considering your own experience. Yeah. I've experienced those definitely. In meditation. I know I have a friend who is a Buddhist monk who was also addicted to drugs when he was younger. And he started practicing Buddhism, and he credits Buddhism as being the kind of power that pulled him through that and having those experiences. And he connects the Buddhist meditative experience with these experiences he had on drugs when he was on drugs. And I think there is certainly something going on. There's certainly something happening. The disconnect I have is when it's used to say, this is evidence or proof to me that God exists. And that's where the disconnect comes for me, because I've had these experiences myself. I do not believe that God exists. And on top of that, I know Muslims, I know Buddhists, I know Christians, I know Hindus who've also had these experiences and cite these experiences as evidence that their religion is true and that their God exists. Now, I'm sure you can see a problem here. And this is, when we were talking about in the early conversations we had on TikTok, when I was talking about why epistemology is so important, there is a major problem here. And that is, although these experiences may seem compelling, not all of those religions can be true because they contradict each other. So there has to be something that gives. There has to be something that gives. And what we can say at best is that, and this has been hugely generous, I think, is that one of the religions is true and the others are false, but that experience is not a good enough experience. It's not a good enough methodology to say which of those religions is true. And I think that's, for me, where the problem arises, because I can accept that you carry on. No,
sorry,
please carry on.
Are you saying, like, in that sense, let's say hypothetically, are you saying that, like, that if one of the religions was true, are you saying that they are, like, wholeheartedly true, like every part of the religion is true, or is it possible that there's some elements to each religion that is true and then some that have been fabricated over time and lost in translation?
That's a great question. That is actually a really, really good question. And this relates back to that paper I referenced earlier. So first of all, I don't think any of them are true. The only reason I brought it up that one of them may be true is that I'm kind of giving a kind of benefit of the doubt argument here just to present a point. I don't believe any of them true, but at best, being the most generous we can be, we could say that even if one of them was true, whether in whole or in part, having one of these experiences is not a good enough methodology to say this can be used as evidence or proof that this is true, because other people of alternative theories also claim this evidence as their religion. Now, that's one part of it. The other part of it, which I raised, was about this picking things up. There is a thing called perennial philosophy, and this is what this paper is actually about. And it talks about that very thing you've just mentioned, that there are common factors when people have these experiences, and we can take kind of little bits of, we can take these common factors and say this describes in an ultimate reality in which God is present, and there are other bits of the religion which we can kind of throw aside and ignore. And they actually talk about this in this paper. The problem with doing that is, it seems, having read this and other papers and spoken to people on this at length who believe this to be true, it seems that those common factors, those commonalities, are the things that they want them to be, to make their particular version of this perennial philosophy true. And they kind of dismiss lots of really, really important factors, like some cultural experiences, some personal experiences that don't fit in to this picture they have of this perennial philosophy. Now, that's all well and good, but it's not particularly a good methodology, because we know from speaking anthropologically, if that's how you say the word, from an anthropologist point of view, that things like the way religions come about and the history and the lineage and the culture are all very, very important to informing these kind of experiences to begin with. So I think it's very difficult to say that on one hand, we're going to accept these mystical experiences that people have that are informed by the culture and the things, but at the same time, simultaneously, dismiss that stuff. And we have a very good, we have a very good record. We've got anthropologists and historians who've studied, like the Neolithic period was the period where organized religion and organized society and warfare all came to be a thing. It all happened in the Neolithic period. And this commonality happened throughout the world at slightly different times, but it happened throughout the world. And those cultural influences are influencing these experiences that people have. And I just don't think you can so easily separate the fact that on one hand it's cultural, but on the other hand, dismissing just the cultural aspects and accepting these bits which inform this mystical belief. I've spoken for a long time, Joe. Please respond to what I've said, then I'm going to let Emma jump in and respond to you.
No, I somewhat agree with that. I do actually agree with that. And, apologies for, I just want to say, apologies for my lack of knowledge on the subject, because, like I said, I'm 21 now. I've only had what I believe is this connection with God for 2 years of my life. Sorry. And, I'd like to state as well, sorry, I don't have too much longer. I don't want to waste your time on nothing, but I just wanted to say, I'm not actually religious. I'm not religious. I don't, with religion, I say the Christian religion, do I believe that, okay, if there was a God, would the God bring me onto this earth for there being a possibility of eternal damnation? Well, that is just crazy. That what even is that about? How is that even fair? And if I don't believe that Jesus Christ is Lord, then I'm going to hell. That's crazy. That's craziness. To me, that is insanity. What I do believe is that there is a source from my personal experience, source. Call it whatever you want. I'm currently studying the Master Key System by Charles F. Harnell. He calls it the universal mind or creator or whatever you want to call it. That is the only bit of where I'm at with my connection with, I call it God because it's easier to call it that way, and that's how people know it. But really and truly, again, I do apologize if I've gone off topic of what you've said and I've not responded entirely of what you said, because I apologize, but I haven't looked into the religions, quote unquote religions as such, quite frankly, because at this stage in my life, I'm not really that interested in researching them. I'm more interested in this connection that I have with this higher being, higher self, whatever you want to call it. For me personally, I feel that it's there. My life is tenfold better. The Master Key System says that we are all experiencing itself, which is a bit of a crazy one. I don't know what it is, but for me, I know that it's there. And I know I keep waffling on and saying this again. I do apologise that I've called up the show with such lack of knowledge on the subject.
I am so glad you've called, Joe. I really, really am. There's an old Buddhist joke that goes something like, a guy walks up to a hot dog stand and the tender says, "What do you want?" And he says, "One with everything." Ha 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 ha. So yeah, look, it's great. I'm gonna if Emma doesn't die laughing, I'm gonna let Emma respond to you, and then we are gonna move on because we have got a couple of more calls to take. I just want to say thank you so much for calling. Keep making your TikTok videos. Keep going on your journey, and if you do want to call back and discuss any of your experiences, you are more than welcome to do so. Please do.
Thank you, Richard. It's good to talk to you, mate.
Emma?
Yeah, no, I think I basically said everything that I thought earlier. I'm just very happy for you on this journey. I mention fairly often, again, I reread the same books over and over again because I'm not a science brain and I have to, I forget everything. But I like reading about quantum physics and quantum mathematics, and I really like Carlo Rovelli, and he talks about this kind of preferred theory of quantum mechanics. I think it's called relational quantum mechanics, but the idea is that at its base level, everything only exists in relationship with each other. And I always feel the most, I guess you would call it, spiritually connected with everything, and the fact that technically, scientifically, it seems possible that everything is simply just one system that only exists in the way that we relate to each other. And for me, that doesn't inspire a kind of deity-like idea, but it gives me a sense of peace in a way, and I think that's a similar kind of experience. And it's just one of those things. It's a beautiful personal experience. We're never going to be able to fully appreciate each other's experiences because we're not in each other's brain. I'm just glad that I'm glad that you're well, and that you agree that certain ideas are a little bit kooky. I think we have a lot of ideas in common. So you keep on keeping on.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm going to let you go, mate. Thanks for calling in, and I'll no doubt speak to you soon.
Yeah.
That was a good. I'm so glad he called in. I genuinely didn't expect him to call, but I am so glad he has. I just want to touch before we move on what you said then about that kind of spiritual experience. Kind of. I've been writing about kind of trying to describe in as few words as possible reality in this book I'm writing at the minute, and it's a tough task, and I've been reading. I mean, I'm interested in cosmology and physics and stuff anyway, as a layperson, strictly as a layperson. But I've been getting like knee deep into, reading lots of papers off from Einstein and stuff. In the past week, I've literally thrown myself into doing this kind of looking into the physics side of this to kind of get this description across to people. And I have to say, that is when I feel most wow, man. I've meditated for a long time. I have what you might call I hate this word, don't crucify me, audience, a spiritual experience. I hate that word. I hate it when Sam Harris uses it. I don't know why I'm using it myself. Just this sense of awe and wonder. I could have just said that to begin with without that stupid word. This sense of awe and wonder, it is amazing. And when you're thinking about the universe, and I've been writing out some thought experiments in this book to try and get people to think and connect personally with just the vastness of the universe. And it really, really is awe-inspiring. A long time ago, there was a band called Hawkwind, and they had a song called Space is Deep. And I just love that title because it's got that double kind of meaning of it being big and deep, man. Wow, man. I just love that title. I think it really captures it. So anyway, let's move on. We have patrons. So I'm going to ask Emma if you have access to the document, which I believe you do.
I do.
To read out our top 5 patrons, if you will.
Yes. Okay, our top 5 patrons are Oops, all singularity, which is so fitting for today. We have Diane Kearns, if I'm pronouncing that right. Dingleberry Jackson. We have Kaleval Helvetii. I don't know why I'm like adjusting my glasses. Like that's going to change how close my monitor is to my face. My partner's laughing at me looking at my laptop recently by leaning in. We have J.A. Carlton and honourable mention Hells Bells. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Of course, we appreciate all our patrons. And if you would like to have your name read on air, then please consider supporting us at tiny.cc/PatreonTH. And we have started recording the Talk Heathen Discord after shows, and that's for all levels of paid Patreon. So if you want more content from us, and you really do get lots of insight into the kind of a bit more about the hosts and a bit more in depth about like their backgrounds and things, it really, really is worth listening to. We have a couple of more super chats. We have Herbie Shine, who has sent £10. He said, Jimmy was recently using a Facebook page to spread his D's equal God experience. He changed his name several times over the months until Promise banned him. He wouldn't have a genuine chat. I've talked about him enough. He's not here to defend himself. I wish he was. I wish he would actually call in and defend himself, because I have been asking for a long time. But yeah, it is what it is. Morgan_Fleeman sends another CHF5. Still don't know what that is. And says, allow me to confuse you with some more CHF. Brilliant. Thank you, Morgan Fleeman. I absolutely love that. And Miranda Rensberger, who's been a member for 1 year, sends $10 and says, when you use a chemical known to alter your mental perceptions, why on earth would you then insist that your chemically altered perceptions are evidence for deity? You already know what caused it. Fair point. Yeah, I can't really argue with that. We have got Tom from Mississippi, and he's got 2 very short stories in response to the poll. Hi, Tom. Welcome to the show, and please take it away.
Okay, this first story taught me a lesson. The second story I'm still puzzled by. So the first story is I was talking to a homeless guy in a parking lot one day, and a couple cop cars showed up. He was a little nervous, so I invited him into my car, and we sat there talking about life and living. And at one point, he asked me, what church do you go to? And I said, I don't go to any church. I'm an atheist. And he said, don't kid yourself, brother. We're having church right now. And I realized he was absolutely right. I mean, he believed in God. I didn't. But we were there in community and charity, talking about being human. So that's a lesson I've kept. Church isn't about God. Second story is the one I don't understand. There's a local coffee shop I often go to, and it's often frequented by, I think he's an Episcopalian priest. And we see each other often enough, so, hi, how's it going? And one day I noticed he was reading a C.S. Lewis book, one which I hadn't read. So I thought it might be a chance to strike up a conversation. So I said, so C.S. Lewis, interesting writer, but personally I don't find him that persuasive. And bang, the shutters came right down, the frigid air started rolling off of them, and that was it. And I can't figure out, I didn't say, you're an idiot if you think C.S. Lewis is any good. I said, I don't think he's persuasive, but that was enough to just completely freeze me right out the door, and I don't understand why.
Yeah, it happens. Funnily enough, just before the show in the green room, we were talking about how C.S. Lewis is not at all compelling.
He's complaining about C.S. Lewis.
so very, very apt thing. Emma, any response to that experience? Have you ever had anything like that where people have just shut down straight away, not responding to you?
Sure. Oh, sure. There's a I mean, there's a million examples. There's a guy who, another English guy who debate on Twitch, and he talks more about politics than religion and things. But you get supercuts every now and then of people that shut down, just immediately being asked some kind of some kind of challenge to their own perspective. Results in name calling and hanging up the phone. It just, some people just aren't prepared to confront anything, and that's just life, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It's weird because I've had experience with religious people, but I'm going to tell you a little story now if you're all sitting comfortably. I was once drafted in. I have the opportunity sometimes to play the bass guitar, and I was drafted in by someone, and I only kind of half knew these guys, but they needed a bass player for a concert they were doing in Oxford. So they drafted me, and I went and practiced with them. We went down. And we did, it was for super toffs. It really was like super toffs, like in this barn on this land in the middle of nowhere. So we went in, we played the concert, we did a bunch of just like average Joe songs. And I was talking to a guy afterwards, and we got on really, really well. And we were talking for about an hour, and it was like getting to like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. It was getting on, a couple of vodkas. And we were having this conversation and getting on really, really well. And this was going back a long, long time. This was before I'd been to university or anything. And he said to me, just like out of the blue during the conversation, I forgot to ask you, which university did you go to? And I went, oh, I didn't go to any university, mate. Nah, I don't need that university life and all that. And then, oh. And he literally about-tailed and walked away from me. It happens in all walks of lives for all sorts of reasons. It's one of those things, unfortunately, and it is something you come across quite a lot with religious people. Some people are prepared for these conversations. Some people aren't. Some people want these conversations. Some people don't. The previous caller, we've been going back and forth on TikTok for quite a while. When I've been trying to persuade him to call, and I'm glad he's kind of taken the steps to do it. But it was really resistant to start with. He really didn't want to. He literally said, "I don't want to talk to you about this stuff." Some people are like that.
Relating to that conversation a bit. You just mentioned bass guitar, which is a point we have in common, though for me, long, long ago. But also, I think you mentioned studying in disciplines which allowed you to have transcendental experience. I studied for quite a while and was able to have transcendental experiences almost at will. But interestingly enough, for me, that moved the needle away from theology and away from spiritualism towards atheism.
I was an atheist.
What was going on what was going on in my brain? And when you look at what goes on in your brain, I think, you kind of get away from spiritualism.
I was an atheist when I started meditating. I got into it through martial arts. I didn't even mean to get into it.
Me too.
Martial arts. I had a proper traditional relationship for the first year of meditating with a Chinese Chan priest who was strict, shall we say? From the aspect of practicing meditation, it was good for me. It probably wasn't entirely legal, but it was good for me. And from that perspective, and I've had many of these experiences that you might call mystical experiences, which I prefer just to call awe-inspiring, to get all of the woo out of it, because I've never felt anything supernatural connected to it, never at all. And that's been the one thing that I've really kind of, I've been studying the texts of Buddhism for probably something like 15 years. I've been meditating for just over 20 years. I've been studying the texts of Buddhism from an academic level for just over about 15 years, something along those lines. And, I've got really deep into them, looked at the different perspectives of them, different schools of Buddhism. I've been up to temples and stayed. I've been on retreats, and I have never, no matter how intense the meditation was, no matter what the conversations have been, and these are, just to clarify, people who believe in the supernatural aspects of Buddhism. I know not everybody does, but the kind of monasteries I've stayed at do believe they were Thai-based monasteries, and they believe in devas that cause storms and all sorts of nonsense. And I've never been compelled by any of the stories I've heard, any of the anecdotes I've heard. I've got a bookshelf full of books by Buddhist mystics and people who have witnessed them doing things, and it just doesn't. It's not compelling to me at all. And I think
here you and I differ in that in my studies it was never spiritually or mystically oriented, but and also there were never any drugs involved at all. But I will possibly another point of contact. When I first interviewed the sensei, he told me if you work very, very hard, you can get a black belt in 3 years. But if you work very hard, it'll probably take you 5 or 6.
Yeah. I love nonsense like that. What is the sound of one hand clapping?
Well, it wasn't nonsense. That actually wasn't nonsense. Think about it a while. He's got to make money. Which means he has to give people black belts. But if you want to be a real student, then he's going to really teach you, and don't expect immediate rewards.
Yeah, I don't find stuff like that compelling. I know I get what you're saying there. It's not a mystical thing in that regard, but things like that are used to kind of display this kind of mysticism. You know, there's lots of koans and riddles and things, and you know,
I think the closest I got to anything really mystic was I studied with a student of Gurdjieff for about 3 years. So that was an interesting experience.
Yeah, I think a lot of them are. I think a lot of these they can be interesting, but as I say, you know, Bodhidharma can be as mystical as he likes, but he's not very skeptical about stuff, and that I think is the kind of crux of it for me. Tom, we appreciate your call, mate. We are going to have to let you go because we are over time. So thank you for calling in.
Thanks, Tom.
I've had a really good show today. And I didn't mean that to sound quite as surprising as I was. Last week, there were a lot of comments in the chat on YouTube complaining about the kind of calls we'd had. But, you know, we're going to take calls. You know, I think I adequately defended those callers to those people concerned. Look, we get all sorts and we take all sorts. And, you know, that's the nature of things. Sometimes you're going to like the calls and sometimes you're not. We're not going to not take calls because you find a certain person or a certain subject untoward. I was on the show yesterday talking about animal consciousness and veganism. And we've had vegan calls on this show in the past and people have complained about them, you know, saying why you taking vegan calls, you should be talking about God. You know, as far as I'm concerned, ethics is part of the larger sphere of what we talk about, and those calls are welcome. And, you know, sometimes you get calls that you don't like. I'm afraid, I'm sorry, and I appreciate you all supporting the show, but you're just going to have to bear with it because the good ones will come when you do that. So on that note, we are going to remind you of the prompts for this week. Jesus' last words, wrong answers only. Reply in the comments and tune in at the beginning of next week's episode to hear the top 3 answers. I do want to thank Jamie for backing up today and helping out. There he is. Jamie, your thoughts, because I am sure you have got many.
It's all a load of transcendental bollocks in it, mate, anyway. But way over my head, Pastor, over my pie grade, I tell you what, mate. Anyway, no. Very briefly, Boltzmann brain, I'm cribbing from the chat. Would it not be an emergent thing in our universe, therefore constrained by natural law? I mean, I don't think anything that would be constrained by natural law would be called a god. You're just throwing the word God around. Secondly, Joe, even if I give you all the toys, let's say there is some universal transcendental thing that you can tap into, and all these different religions are tapping into it differently and just interpreting it differently. I give you all that. 2 people come up to me, one of whom took a bunch of DMT and talked to God, and the other one just tripped balls and thinks he talked to God. How do I tell the difference? What methodology can we use to differentiate truth from fiction on that one? Because testimony don't really work for me, Chief. Sorry. And and that's pretty much it. Other than, I think you'll find, sir, that your continual malapropisms and failure to properly use the English language, Queen's language, not the King's, fuck him, really was letting the side down. Bury her.
I have no fucking idea what he just said. We had someone in the comment in the chat, and I didn't address it at the time because we were on the call with Joe, and I didn't want to kind of get distracted from that. Who was complaining that there's the British episode of Talk Heathen, and it's all represented by English people. Can I just point out? That little flag there is not English.
That and I knew you were going to be angry.
Quite clearly says Scotland on it. Thank you very much and good night. So for the rest of you, I'm only joking. It says, you know, fair comment. You can be forgiven. We have got another super chat. And that is from Morgan Fleeman, who says, "No worries, Richard. I'll come in the after show and explain what CHFR." It's really getting way too overcomplicated for a simple currency donation. Anybody who wants to come into the ACD after show, you are more than welcome. We will all be there. You can hang out with us for a little while. The address is tiny.cc/ACD Discord. And if you don't believe, this is your community. And we appreciate you being here. And if you do believe, and I hope this has been demonstrated today with, Joe calling, we're not going to jump on everybody. We're not going to just attack you just because you're religious and have these experiences. We're going to talk to you and try and walk through whether these are justification for believing what you believe. And that's what we do. We're not here to shout. We're not here to bawl. We're not here to really raise hell with you just because you believe something different to us. That's not what we're about at all on this show. So if you're nervous for calling in, if you are a religious believer and you're nervous about calling in because you think, I've seen these shows before, all it is the host ganging up on us and shouting at me, and it's going to make me feel uncomfortable. You're not going to get that with us. We will match your energy. If you come in like Joe did, like the first caller did, and just explain your experience, we're going to have a conversation. We might challenge you on it, but we're going to be nice about it. We're going to have a friendly conversation with you. If you come in balls tripping, saying you're wrong, that you're wrong, you atheists are always wrong, you talk shit all the time, rah, 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 trust me, I will match your energy. But I'm not going to meet you like that to begin with. That's not what we're about here. So if you don't believe, we don't hate you. We're just not convinced. We'll see you next time.
We want the truth. So watch Truth Wanted live, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. Call 512-991-9242 or visit tiny.cc/call TW.